evening. I'd like to call a special community development committee meeting for September 24th, 2018. I'll take attendance. We have all in council here except for Councilman Winarski, and on the administrative side, Treasurer Ramsey. Mr. Levinsky.
Move to excuse Mr. Winarski and Mr. Ramsey. They have letters on file.
Got a motion, Mr. Cover.
Second.
Second on the floor. All those in favor of excusing Councilman Winarski and Treasurer Ramsey, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. On the agenda we have today 3 items: A1844, resolution recognizing service to the city by David Kukuka; A1845, resolution recognizing service to the city by John Dietrich; and A1846, resolution recognizing service to the city by previous Mayor Dave Taylor. We'll go ahead and if there's any questions or comments, as you have in front of you, can I entertain a motion? Mr. Dembinski.
Do you want one for all 3, or do you want 3 separate? One for all 3.
No, second.
Separate. Move to take A1844 to the floor of council with emergency.
We have a motion on the floor to take, excuse me, A1844 to the floor with emergency. Mr. Van Schuren.
Second.
Second by Councilman Van Schuren. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it. 18-45, resolution recognizing service to the city by John Dietrich to the floor. We have a second. Mr. Jansen. Mr. Jennett.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Obviously no discussion. We'll move this to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it, 6-0. And the final item on the agenda is A1846, a resolution recognizing service to the city by David Taylor. Mr. Dembinski.
I'm not a grandstander, but I'll make the comment all 3 are well deserved just before making the motion to pass A-1846 onto the floor of council with emergency.
Thank you. We do have a motion on the floor by Councilman Dembinski to move A1846 to the floor. Do I have a second? Mr. Nahorn.
Second, please.
We have a second on the floor. Comments? Go ahead and take this to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it, 6-0. Mr. Dembinski.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn by Councilman Dembinski. Mr. Cowger.
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor of adjourning our special community development committee meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. We will adjourn at 7:01.
Call to order the regular city council meeting tonight at 7 o'clock on September 24th, 2018. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski?
Roll call.
Mr. Winarski? Mr. Nahorn?
Present.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Janik?
Here.
Mr. Van Turen?
Here.
Mr. Dembinski?
Here.
Mr. Cowger?
Here.
Thank you. We'll stand to be led in prayer by Mr. Dembinski.
Move to excuse, thank you, Mr. Winarski and Mr. Ramsey. They have letters on file.
Thank you, Mr. Cowger.
Second.
Thank you. The motion and the second to excuse Mr. Ramsey and Mr. Winarski. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0. They are excused. Now, will you please stand to be led in prayer by Chaplain Nahorn and then to the pledge to the flag by Sergeant at Arms Dembinski.
Please join me in bowing your heads. Gracious God, we welcome the autumn season and are glad that this will continue to bring the blessing of cooler temperatures from the summer heat. Soon, the colorful leaves across the landscape will brighten our day, even as we recognize each day becoming shorter. We also thank all those who continue to serve our community and who have served our community, especially those we are recognizing this evening. And now let the words of our mouths and meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your vision. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's go to item 4 on the consent agenda.
Minutes of the regular council meeting held September 10th, 2018. Minutes of the executive committee meeting held September 17th, 2018. Minutes of the finance committee meeting held September 17th, 2018. Minutes of the ordinance committee meeting held September 17th, 2018. Minutes of the special community development committee meetings held September 24th, 2018.
Mr. Cowger.
Move to accept the consent agenda as read.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
There's a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as read. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Consent agenda is accepted. We'll go to item number 5, acknowledgement of the public pertaining to items on the agenda. Is there anyone here tonight wishing to speak on any item on the agenda? Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to once again thank the 3 servants that have served our city for such a long time over the past years and years and years and years. At least all 3 of you have been here for my short 6. And I think it's fitting that we have you back here and we say thank you. I know I appreciate all the guidance and the mentoring you 3 did for me. So I look forward to passing these tonight and recognizing you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll go to item 6, ordinances and resolutions. First reading, item 6A.
An ordinance authorizing the reappropriation of funds in various departments and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Cowger.
Make a motion to suspend council rules so that item A may be passed on the first reading.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the council rule that requires 3 readings so that item 6A can be passed on the first reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Rule is suspended. Mr. Dembinski.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
There's a motion and a second to adopt. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
It'll be ordinance 01831.
Item 6B.
An ordinance authorizing the increase in appropriation for part-time wages for part-time employees of the fire department and appropriation for gasoline and oil within the fire apparatus fire levy budget and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Dembinski.
Move to suspend council rules that item 6B may be passed on the first reading.
Mr. Fowler.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings so that item 6B can be passed on the first reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. That rule is suspended. Mr. Cowger.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. That item 6B is adopted.
It'll be ordinance 01832.
Item 6C.
A resolution authorizing the reappointment by City Council of 2 members of the Municipal Income Tax Local Board of Tax Review for 2 years commencing January 1st, 2018, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Dembinski.
Move to suspend council rules so that item 6C may be passed on the first reading.
Mr. Cowger.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings so that item 6C can be passed on the first reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. That rule is suspended. Mr. Dembinski.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Cowger.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt item 6C. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
6C is adopted.
It'll be resolution R1804.
Item 6D, please.
An ordinance establishing the salaries and benefits of the permanent part-time tax assistant and setting the pay rate terms and other conditions, and ordinance establishing the salaries and benefits of the permanent part-time assistant 1 and setting the pay rate terms and other conditions of employment and declaring an emergency.
I have a request by the treasurer to return this item to committee. Mr. Cowger.
I'd like to make a motion to table item D and return it to committee.
Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to return item 6D to committee and table it. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 6D is tabled and returned to committee. Item 6E, please.
An ordinance authorizing the purchase and installation of equipment necessary for improved video recording and broadcast of municipal meetings not to exceed $50,000.
Mr. Van Turen.
Move to send this on to the second reading.
Mr. Cowger.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to send item 6E onto the second reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 6E is sent to the second reading. All right, we get to the very best part. Item 6F, please.
A resolution recognizing and commending David Kapuka for his outstanding public service as as a member of Amherst City Council and City of Amherst, Ohio Auditor, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, move to suspend council rules so this may be passed on the first reading.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dembinski?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings so that this item may deservedly be passed on the first reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Yes. I need a motion to adopt. Mr. Dembinski?
Move to adopt.
Mr. Janik?
Second?
There's a motion and a second to adopt. Comments or questions, please? Mr. Miller?
Thank you. I'd like to take this time to quickly read the resolution out loud so that it can be heard by those here and those on TV. A resolution recognizing and commending David Kukuka for his outstanding public service as a member of Amherst City Council and City of Amherst, Ohio Auditor, and declaring an emergency. Whereas David Kukuka has exemplified civic spirit, outstanding conduct, and devotion to the duties incumbent upon him while serving as the Amherst 4th Ward Councilman at Large, Councilman, and City of Amherst, Ohio Auditor. And whereas David Kukuka, with distinction and dedication, served as Amherst 4th Ward Council at Large Council for a total of 10 years, in the city as its auditor for 12 and a half years, serving our community for more than 22 years. And whereas David Kukuka, in his role as auditor, successfully secured an improved bond rating and funds to complete the Jackson Street Bridge project. And whereas David Kukuka, in his role as auditor, received from the Ohio State Auditor the Award of Distinction and Excellence in the annual reporting on 8 separate occasions. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Amherst, State of Ohio, that Section 1, that Amherst City Council does hereby recognize and commend former council member and City of Amherst, Ohio Auditor David Kukuka for his devotion to his duties incumbent upon him, and wishes him much success, health, and prosperity in his future endeavors. Section 2, that a duly certified copy of this resolution be presented to David Kukuka to symbolize the city's gratitude to David Kukuka, as well as a tribute to his dedication and service to our community. That it is found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating the passage of this resolution were adopted in an open meeting of council, and that all deliberations of this council and any of its committees that result in such formal actions were in the meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including Section 121.22 ORC. And finally, that this resolution is hereby declared an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Amherst, Ohio, the emergency being needed to provide immediate recognition to the city's public servants who have served with excellence with the intention of promoting similar participation in local government, and provided it receives the majority of 2/3 or more of those elected to city council, it shall go in full force and effect from and immediately hereafter its passage and its approval by the mayor. Otherwise, it shall take effect at its earliest date provided by law. Once again, I'd like to extend a congratulations, a thank you, and if you'd like to say anything, if not, thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. The resolution commending Mr. Kukuka is adopted.
It'll be ordinance 01805. Resolution. Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Item 6G, please.
A resolution recognizing and commending John Dietrich for his outstanding public service to the city of Amherst and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Dembinski.
Move to suspend council rules so that item 6G may be passed on the first reading.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the council rule requiring 3 readings so that item 6G can be passed on the first reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. That rule is suspended. Mr. Janik?
Move to adopt.
Mr. Dembinski?
Second?
There's a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Mr. Miller, I know you wish to speak.
Thank you, Madam President, again. I'd like to read a resolution recognizing and commending John Diedrich for his outstanding public service to the city of Amherst in declaring an emergency. Whereas John Diedrich has exemplified the civic spirit, outstanding conduct, and devotion to his duties incumbent upon him while serving as president of Amherst City Council. And whereas John Diedrich with distinction and dedication began his service in 1972, including 2 years as Amherst electrical inspector, 2 years on the zoning board of appeals, past president and member of the board of directors of Amherst Community Investment Corporation. And whereas John Diedrich played a major role in the development and modernization of Amherst with the relocation of Lower Met Credit Union headquarters and attracting Precision Auto, Premier Toyota, and Premier Foods Factory to Cooper Foster Park Road and Target to Oak Point Road. And now that therefore it be resolved by the Council of the City of Amherst, State of Ohio, that Amherst City Council does hereby recognize and commend former President of City Council John Diedrich for his devotion to his duties incumbent upon him and wishes him much success, health, and prosperity in his future endeavors. That a duly certified copy of this resolution will be presented to John Diedrich to symbolize the city's gratitude to John Diedrich as well as a tribute to his dedication and service to the community. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 6G is adopted, and I'd like to personally thank Mr. Dietrich for setting such a good example.
It would be R1806.
We will go on to item 6H, please.
A resolution recognizing and commending David A. Taylor for his outstanding public service as a member of Amherst City Council, Safety Service Director, Safety and Service Director, and City of Amherst, Ohio Mayor, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Dembinski.
Move to suspend council rules that item 6F, or H may be suspended on council
Mr. Janik.
first reading.
I knew it.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry.
That's okay. There's a motion and a second to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings so that item 6H can be passed on the first reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Rule is suspended. Mr. Miller?
Move to adopt.
Mr. Dembinski.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to adopt. Mr. Miller, I know you wish to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. We'll go ahead and read the resolution and then have a quick comment at the end. And then I guess we'll go to the vote. A resolution recognizing and commending David A. Taylor for his outstanding public service as a member of Amherst City Council, Safety Service Director, Safety and Service Director, and City of Amherst, Ohio Mayor, and declaring an emergency. It's a mouthful. Whereas David A. Taylor has exemplified civic spirit, outstanding conduct, and devotion to the duties incumbent upon him while serving as Amherst 2nd Ward Councilman, Safety Director, Safety Service Director, Planning Commission member, Amherst Community Investment Corporation Board member, and as the City of Amherst Mayor. And whereas David A. Taylor, with distinction and 26 years of dedication, served the residents of our great city 2 terms as an Amherst 2nd Ward Councilman, 8 years as the City Safety Director, 2 years as the Safety Service Director, and 12 years as the City of Amherst 35th Mayor. And whereas David A. Taylor, in his role as mayor, successfully improved the city's water, sewer, and electrical distribution systems, upgraded the Water Pollution Control Center, completed the Jackson Street Bridge project, renegotiated the water contract with the City of Elyria, obtained over $5 million in grant funding for various city projects, and kept the city financially sound by enacting 12 balanced budgets. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Amherst, State of Ohio, that Amherst City Council does hereby recognize and commend former council member, Safety Director, Safety and Service Director, and the City of Amherst, Ohio's 35th Mayor, David A. Taylor, for his devotion to his duties incumbent upon him, and wishes him much success, health, and prosperity in his future endeavors. That a duly certified copy of this resolution will be presented to David A. Taylor to symbolize the city's gratitude to David A. Taylor, as well as a tribute to his dedication and 26 years of service to our community. And of course, the rest remains the same. Madam President, I just wanted to wrap that up with, before we adopt this, just a big thanks, not only to them on my behalf, but I want to thank Mayor Costello and Council President General Soak, and our law director over there, Mr. Pecora, and everybody else that's got behind this. We even have Mr. Winarski, who unfortunately couldn't make it today, who went ahead and helped me co-sponsor this. And this would not happen if it wasn't for all of you. And we obviously would not be in the great position we're in today if it wasn't for the three of you. So with that, I thank you. I will, once again, I've spoken to the families. We'll invite everybody here and anybody on TV that wants to sneak down to Giuseppe's across the street and give a warm thank you. There'll be food and stuff waiting for them there. So thank you very much, and I'd love to make that, or go ahead and call that to order.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dubinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 6H is adopted, and I'd like to thank Mayor Taylor for 12 years of light and enlightenment with the city. Thank you very much.
It'll be Resolution R-1807.
Thank you. And if they, Mr. Councilman, would you like to pause, and if they would like to leave?
Yes. If you'd like to depart any wisdom on us one last time, or would you, if you'd like to.
I'd like to say something. I normally try not to.
Welcome back.
What I'd like to say is, and I've always felt this way, nobody does this by themselves. It takes the help and cooperation of everybody. And I was been very thankful over the years for Dave for keeping us fiscally responsible. And then thanks for Shorty for all his support and guidance through the 12 years. And the thing is, I wanted to make sure everybody knows, is I always say this story, and Jamie's not going to like this, but I always told everybody that if I made one right decision in 12 years, is when I hired her as my secretary. So I'd like I'd like to thank all the administration here who I've worked with all the years, and all of council, some of us I've worked with. You've all been great, and the city is very fortunate to have this group of people making sure they're doing the city's business. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We'll go on to item 7, ordinances and resolutions. The second reading, item 7A, please.
An ordinance repealing chapters 1341, 1342, and 1344 of Part 13, Title 3 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Amherst, and enacting a new chapter 1340 entitled Property Maintenance, which adopts the International Property Maintenance Code 2015 edition, including Appendix A thereto, relating to boarding standards with certain amendments and additional provisions, and amending Section 1125.03 of the codified ordinances to grant jurisdiction to the Board of Zoning Appeals to hear and determine appeals from decisions, notices, or orders of the code official acting under the International Property Maintenance Code.
Mr. Cowger?
I'd like to make a motion to pass item A on to the third reading.
Mr. Miller?
Second, please.
There's a motion and a second to pass item 7A on to the third reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dubinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 7A is moved to the third reading. Item 7B, please.
An ordinance renewing for a period of 10 years the present 0.5% income tax levy previously approved and passed by the electors on November 3rd, 2009, subject to passage and approval of the voters of the City of Amherst at the primary election on May 7th, 2019.
Mr. Dubinsky.
Move to send item 7B on to the third reading.
Mr. Cowger.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to send item 7B on to the third reading, excuse me. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dubinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 7B is sent to the third reading. Item 7C, please.
A resolution to place on the ballot for the primary election to be held on May 7, 2019, the question of renewing the 0.5% income tax levy previously passed November 3, 2009, with a 0.5% income tax levy.
Mr. Dubinsky.
Move to send item 7C on to the third reading.
Mr. Cowger.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to send item 7C on to the third reading. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dubinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 7C is sent to the third reading. Go on to item 8, ordinances and resolutions. Third reading, there are none. Go on to item 9, miscellaneous and acknowledgement of the public. I have a number of items, and one item is we have a vacancy on the design review board for a council representative. Mr. Winarski has resigned. I've appointed Mr. Nahorn. He's been willing to accept that appointment. Are there any objections to that appointment? Let the record show that there are no objections. There has been for some time a vacancy on the ambulance board, and Mr. Cowger has agreed to serve in that capacity as the council representative. Are there any objections to the appointment of Mr. Cowger to that board? Seeing none, please, no objections, please let the record show that. We also have a request from a number of council members to have the first council meeting for the month of October moved to Monday, the 8th of October. It was scheduled for the 9th. If you wish to do that, we will need to have a motion to change that schedule. Mr. Van Turen.
Move to change the first meeting in October to Monday, the 8th of October.
Okay, and Mr. Dubinsky.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to change the meeting date for the first city council meeting for the month of October 2018 from the 9th of October to the Monday, the 8th. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion is carried 6-0, and the next meeting of the regular city council will be on the 8th of October, Monday, and that will be at 7 o'clock. Are there any other items, anyone wishing to speak on any item? Mr. Nahorn, please.
Thank you. Just briefly, I had the opportunity to tour our water pollution control center last week, and I thank Mr. Brayler for taking the opportunity to give me a thorough and complete tour with my background in environmental studies. I appreciate the process, but each city does it a little bit differently, so I wanted to be able to check out our specific, the way that we do it here exactly. And so I thank Mr. Brayler for giving me the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other person wishing to speak on any item? Yes, ma'am, would you like to come to the podium and state your name and address, please? We need to do that for the recording.
Oh, it's spots on me. Gosh, I'm the only one. I was trying to get my daughter-in-law to come. It's just about the electric bill.
Yeah, please state your name and address.
Oh. I'm Kathy Olson. I live at 745 Ford Avenue, in Amherst. And my daughter flips houses, so the house I'm in is right next to Chucky DeLugas used to live there. Or Mr. DeLugas owned a lot of the property there for after a while. But anyway, I get to live there now, except that the phone or the light bill went up a couple $100. Like she wants me to pay more money. And so I tried to get my daughter-in-law. She was upset about her bill, and we were wondering if there's something we can do about it, or why the. I didn't call at Mr. Dubinsky's advice. He was very, very nice to answer my call and try to, to talk me down a little bit. But I didn't get a chance to talk to the electric department as he advised, as to how. Apparently, it's like a couple months back or the beginning of the summer that they're charging. All of a sudden, we're getting the bill this month. Is there anything we can do?
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, we went over that
we
went over that quite extensively at the last regular city council meeting.
Okay.
I think you missed your first step. You admitted yourself. I mean, honestly, the first thing you really need to do is go to the utilities department. They have a lot of information. They can go over your past bills. They can look at your past usages. They might be able to look at the time period with which you were billed. So there's a lot of questions they can answer that we don't know here. And then honestly, my door's open all the time. I'll talk about it in reports administration, but we've talked to quite a few people over the last couple of weeks. But honestly, until you really go to the utilities department, there's really not much any else of us can do.
My daughter went to a car show or something, or something.
Yeah, they're there every day till 4:30. So honestly,
so she has the bill. I wish I had it, and I would take it in.
yeah, and they have copies of your bills. I mean, you go in. The staff there is very helpful, and that's the best first. That's the best first step.
Are they ever going to split the bills up like in regular, bigger cities? Don't they have like a light bill and then you get a water bill and they're separate?
I don't actually see that changing, but
Okay.
we'll know more information about that once we get through this meter change in our new software.
Well,
But that's your first step. You should stop at the utilities office.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, you guys. This is the first meeting I've been to since I used to live on another house on Ford Avenue back in the day, and we were trying to keep people from building at the end. No apple orchard, we're trying to get a dead end street, and it didn't happen. But anyway, thank you, and Mr. Dubinsky was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got to be in the honor, of all this.
You picked a
This
good
is great.
meeting.
Yeah. Oh, this is fun.
Thank you.
All the royalty here.
Anyone else wishing to speak on any subject? Seeing no one wishing to speak, we will go on to item 10, agenda requests and committee meeting schedules.
Okay, I do have to read these off because they were added after the last council meeting. In community development, it was A 1844, resolution recognizing service to city by David Kukuka. A 1845, and these all went to community development, I'm sorry. A resolution recognizing service to the city by John Dietrich. And then A 1846 community development, it was a resolution recognizing service to the city by David Taylor. And then I have one new item, Madam President, and that's to finance A 1847, reappropriate funds in auditor department from workers' compensation to part-time wages in the amount of $2,000. And that's all I have this evening.
Thank you. Finance, Mr. Cowger.
Yes, I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting on October 8th at 6:50 prior to council. One item on that agenda, A1847, reappropriate funds in Auditor's Department from workers' compensation to part-time wages in the amount of $2,000. And that is complete, Madam President.
Building and lands, Mr. Van Truin.
Nothing at this time, Madam President, please cancel.
Streets, Mr. Van Truin.
No items, Madam President, please cancel.
Community development, Mr. Miller.
No items, please cancel.
Before I call on you for executive, Mr. Miller, Mr. Ramsey has asked for some additional steps to be taken with those documents, and there will probably be some time before they're ready to actually be called for committee. So I wanted to let you know that. Executive, Mr. Miller.
No items for further notice. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Ordinance, Mr. Dembowski.
No items at this time, Madam President, please cancel.
Utilities, Mr. Janik.
No item, Madam President, please cancel.
Recycle, Mr. Nahor.
Please keep recycling.
Thank you. Technology, Mr. Dembowski.
No items at this time, Madam President, please cancel.
Thank you. Police and fire, Mr. Winarski. Oh, Mr. Miller.
No items, please cancel, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Annexation, Mr. Van Truin.
No items at this time, please cancel.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's one, there will be one committee meeting, and it will be on the Monday, the 8th at 6:50. Monday, October. Thank you. We'll go on to item 11, reports of the administration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Pitek?
No report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pecora?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Jeffries?
One small item echoing Chaplain Wasuk's comment, or Chaplain Nahorn's, I'm sorry, comments about the changing leaves. We'll be announcing leaf pickup schedule here coming up soon. So, end of report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. I guess we really are blessed with the three gentlemen that came in today to be honored. Their long service was really appreciated by a lot of residents. Most of the time goes unnoticed, so me as the mayor here really do appreciate everything they've done in the past years, except Mayor, especially Mayor Taylor for picking a very good secretary. And again, one of the best decisions I think he's ever made, and I'll ditto that. Two items might seem small, but this is a big deal. Our long-awaited and our much-needed Cooper Foster Road rehab project is actually out for bid. So that item should be in contractors' hands, and the predicted bid date opening of October 2nd. Could be extended, I don't know yet, but that's the actual date that I'm being told that those bids will be open. So hopefully we'll get a contractor on board, and that's going to be a year-long project. And as soon as the weather starts breaking, early or late winter, hopefully get that project started. Probably not what a lot of people want to hear with all the barrels we still already have this year, but that's project is really coming to light. It's going to happen. And then to talk just real briefly about the electric and the new the easy read meter system that we're putting in. The electric department did set up some meter testing. That seemed to be one of the biggest concerns that I thought we could immediately address, was check the validity of these meter readings and how they're reading the electricity. So we immediately that next day took some meters of residents that had expressed the most concerns about how accurate they were, and we took 4 of them to Oberlin City, and they were gracious enough to check those meters for us, and they checked with Inspect. And then we hired a company to come in from out of state, and we bought a piece of equipment that actually checks electric meter and their accuracy. And we checked side by side. We actually, the people that had big concerns, we actually went back through the boxes and found their old meters, because some of their concerns was the old meter's reading slow, this one's reading fast. 2%, just to skip around a little bit, 2% is the industry standard. Either 98% of an accurate reading or 102% is what the industry accepts as normal. So we checked close to 50 meters, some of our big industrial users we also checked. But the people with the most concerns, and this is a book they've put together, We have not found an old meter that checked more than 0.05 out of whack, and the average is coming in about 0.02%, either plus or minus, on the new meters. So I mean, you're talking pennies on a $100 bill for inaccuracy. The meter tech that was here from out of state with his company, I forget the meter tech something was his company name. He talked about these newer ones that we're getting. He said they either work or they don't. There's no moving parts. They measure electricity with light impulses. It either doesn't work and you're getting free electricity, or it doesn't work and you're getting no electricity. And either way, we're going to know that with this new system, because it's going to send us a signal that the meter's malfunctioning. But here it is. We don't have a complete report yet, but if council's interested in seeing this later when we get it completely together, it shows each report from each meter. It shows what it was tested at the factory. And I mean, honestly, when you're only talking tenths of a hundredths of a percent, they tested very close to what the meter showed, because there's actually a report that comes with the box that shows what they tested at the factory. So we're very confident that that the higher usages and these bigger bills is not due to inaccurate meters. So that was the best thing I could do to lay people's mind at rest. We're still looking at the times that meters were read, and if anybody has concerns, please start at the utilities office and then come down and see us at the mayor's office if you don't like your answer there. And unless you have any other questions, I mean, if you had other questions for me, I could answer them. But if not, that's the end of my report. But it looks like we have one.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
I just want to say thank you, your transparency and consistency in following up on our residents' issues, and I think this should rest many people's minds to ease that there's nothing going on except for there's an adjustment at this particular time due to our meter switch out, which is going to be beneficial for the city when it comes down to reading and providing a better service and better product. So I think you've done everything that could be asked, and I thank you for that. So no more further questions. I yield the floor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dembinski.
Thank you, Madam President. I also want to mention I received the latest CAFR within the past week, and I might have some questions about that going through, but there's a lot of information. But just as an FYI, we did receive that. So that was all I had. Move to accept the reports of the administration.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to accept the reports of the administration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion is carried 6-0. The reports of the administration are accepted. Yeah, well, and to segue right into Mr. Dembinski's comment, item 12, acknowledgement of the 2017 CAFR report from the auditor. This is just to acknowledge that. You all received a copy of it. Mr. Auditor, do you have any comments?
Yes, Madam President. Mr. Dembinski, if you have any questions, or if anyone else on council, if you want to address them at this time, we certainly can. If you want to reach out to me, we can set a time in the office. Typically in office on Mondays and available by phone throughout the rest of the week. So please take advantage of that if you need to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dembinski.
I should have read ahead. I'm sorry for jumping your gun again. Move to acknowledge the report of the CAFR.
Okay. Mr. Calver.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to acknowledge the 2017 CAFR report acceptance from the auditor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion is passed 6-0. The CAFR receipt is acknowledged. Mr. Calver.
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Dembinski.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carried is 6-0. We are adjourned at 6:47, or 7:47.
There was something about tonight. Everybody was just like.